The Silver Wraith was the first post-war Rolls-Royce. It was made from 1946 to 1958 as only a chassis at the company's Crewe factory, its former Merlin engine plant, alongside the shorter Bentley Mark VI. The Bentley was also available as a chassis for coach builders, but for the first time could be bought with a Rolls-Royce-built standard steel body. The use of the name Wraith coincided with the established tradition of naming models after ghosts. It was announced by Rolls-Royce in April 1946 as the 25/30th HP replacement for the 1939 Wraith in what had been their 20 horsepower and 2025 HP market sector, that is to say Rolls-Royce's smaller car. The size was chosen to be in keeping with the mood of post-war austerity. Even very limited production of the chassis of the larger car, the Phantom 4, was not resumed until 1950 and then, officially, only for heads of state. Improvements announced were chromium-plated cylinder bores for the engine, a new more rigid chassis frame to go with new independent front suspension, and a new synchromesh gearbox. Chassis lubrication was now centralized. Engine. The straight 6-cylinder post-war engine, which had been briefly made for the aborted-by-war Bentley Mark V, replaced conventional overhead valve gear with an F-head configuration of overhead inlet valves and side exhaust valves and reshaped combustion chambers. There were new main and big end bearings and a more efficient drive to the timing gear. To this pre-war mix Rolls-Royce added chromed bores. Initially, this engine retained the Mark V's capacity of 4,257 cubic centimeters, 259.8 cu-in, increased from 1951 to 4,566 cubic centimeters, 278.6 cu-in, and in 1955, after the introduction of the standard wheelbase, Silver Cloud, to 4,887 cubic centimeters, 298.2 cu-in, for the remaining Silver Wraiths. Chassis. 1956 Silver Wraith by Hooper Clear Perspex top for Nubar Gulbenkian. The first cars had an entirely new 127-inch, 3,226 mm, wheelbase chassis which differed considerably from that of the pre-war Wraith and was much nearer rigid. It matched the new Bentley chassis but with an extra 7-inch section added to the center. The new chassis had coil-sprung independent front suspension, which required a very rigid chassis to function properly, and at the rear conventional semi-elliptic springs and live axle. The braking system was a hydromechanical hybrid of hydraulic fronts and mechanical rears using the mechanical servo similar to that of the pre-war cars. The last short wheelbase cars were delivered in November 1953. The long, 133-inch, 3,378 mm, wheelbase chassis was announced in 1951 and the first delivered in January 1952. 639 were made by the time of the last deliveries in October 1958. This was not quite the last Rolls-Royce model to be supplied as a rolling chassis ready for a wide variety of bespoke coachwork designed and made by a rapidly declining number of specialist coach builders. Most of the bodies selected used formal limousine designs. From 1949 until 1955 customers wishing to buy a Rolls-Royce fitted with a much smaller standard steel body could purchase the Silver Dawn. It rode on a chassis 7 inches shorter than the Silver Wraith, and was almost identical to Rolls-Royce's Bentley standard steel saloon available alongside the Silver Wraith since July 1946. Initially only a 4-speed manual gearbox was offered, but this was supplemented by a General Motors Hydromatic automatic option from 1952. And thanks for watching and subscribe.